So, welcome to the Propwash podcast. London Perch finder.
Hello.
Adam Jones.
How's
it going, bud? Yeah, I'm good.
Thanks
really good, mate. It's good to have you on here. So, you've obviously listened to a few bits and pieces that we've done from other people. Andy Ford was on. We've had some of the guys over from the States and that. So, we've been working out. We've got a brand new sign.
I love it. I love it.
It's getting a little bit
serious.
A little bit professional, really.
Yeah, I like it.
So we've got our all set up. We've got good old Ben behind the camera so that we're putting them out on YouTube now as well. Because originally I just bought the mic and started to sort of record them like that. But I thought people wanted that dynamic of seeing people and how they interact and that. So I think it's quite cool.
Yeah.
You can have the podcast on in the car on YouTube. But you don't have to watch it, so you can hear the audio, or you can just download it on Apple or Podbean or whatever, so it works really well. So
awesome.
Let's get into it. Right, so got a sort of format of questions that I like to try and ask people.
Fair enough, fire away.
So, how did you get into fishing, and what was your first fish that you ever caught? So I want the whole thing. I want to paint the picture. I want to know everything. So set the scene and describe it to us.
Wow. How did I get into fishing? It's a weird one. I am one of those people that didn't have somebody to take me fishing. I just woke up when I was a kid and decided that that's what I wanted to do. So my parents don't fish. I guess the closest, my granddad, who lived hundreds of miles away from where we were when I was a kid, he was a little bit into it, but I think to his own admission didn't really know what he was doing. So I probably started chasing fish from like the age of 4. I used to go down to Shilton Dip in the Cotswolds with a net and catching minnows and stuff like that. And, literally they just released me into this little, it's like a ford at Shilton, which is just outside of Burford. And I quickly realised that the best way to catch them is to just kind of hammer the net down on top of the shoals of minnows and stuff.
Butterfly style.
Exactly, just whip them out. So I guess, from a fishing standpoint, I've been fascinated by fish for years and years. And then, I'd go to Bourton on the Water, which is kind of where I grew up. My dad was in the Air Force, so we lived near Brize Norton, so all of those types of the Windrush and places like that. Used to catch like bullheads with my hands underneath the stones in the river.
Yeah. So fascinated by water from an early age, basically.
Absolutely, just loved it and was so... I'm dyslexic, so I don't really read many books, but any books that I did read were all fishing books and, kind of the days before YouTube and podcasts and all of these things. So same as everybody else, the John Wilsons, the Matt Hayes, the kind of TV shows got me into it. So from a kind of just messing around at the water standpoint, it was bullheads and minnows that really got my brain going. And then I think I probably caught my first trout when I was about 6, something like that.
So this is on rod and line?
Yeah.
So where did you find the tackle? How did you get the tackle? And where was the first location?
So first time I ever caught one would have been at Bybury Trout Farm, which is in Bybury, obviously, on the Windrush, and they've got a little fishing section.
So it's like pay and play sort of thing.
And you just kind of
your dinner.
They give you basically, and they give you a little fly rod, but with the line tied on the end of it. It's probably the first time I caught something actually on rod and line, and then started doing a little bit of fly fishing on the Windrush. To be honest, when I was a kid, I used to just jump on my bike with a spool of line and a little hook and some bread, and really was totally fascinated by rivers. And then, like lots of people, kind of transitioned into catching everything, but carp was the easiest thing to go after, and not commercial carp because it was only really starting to come in back then, but not full mud pig ponds, if that makes sense. Kind of fishing a waggler, catching tench, catching carp, catching bream, catching bits and bobs. And then, kind of all stemmed from there, really. So
did you get into like junior matches? Did you go down that sort of route with like the local angling club?
So I did a bit. Hilariously, like I said, my family aren't into fishing at all. And I was a nut when I was a kid. So we went to Whiteacres down in Cornwall. Yeah. And so Mum and Dad we used to stay in one of the caravans there. I would fish all day. Mum and Dad would take my sisters off to the beach. And I entered in a Wednesday silver match at Whiteacres when I was 12. And I went into the shop, paid my money. I had my Kingfisher rods from Argos, little, the red dam box that everybody had. And, they took my money at the beginning of the match. I sat down on Jenny's Lake, I think it is, at Whiteacres. And ended up figuring it out pretty quickly that I needed to fish a feeder to this island in the middle. But all I had was a float rod.
Right.
So I fished a kingfisher 13-foot float rod with a feeder to the island, and short version is I won the match.
Right.
And there's, basically guys.
So you bought ground bait and you'd
Yeah,
you'd done the whole
I had
thing.
everything, but like, even thinking about it now, it's mental because, nobody told me what to do. I literally just turned up and kind of faffed around, bodged together this result. And guys go down there. Obviously, I didn't know at the time. My parents thought it was hilarious because they had no clue. And like how big a deal it was. So we turned up at the end of the match, and there's like a full match of people on this Wednesday match. And basically, you qualify for the Park Dean Masters if you win one of their matches, or the October Festival, or whatever it was called back then. So I came back to get my winnings, and there was these fully grown men basically saying I couldn't win. I was too young, and my dad, it's the only time he's ever really cared about the fishing stuff, just said, well, you're happy to take his money, so he's got to win. So I ended up winning this game, this match.
So you were fishing for silvers to the island. So what's this, bream, skimmers,
roach? At the time, Jenny's Lake was a bit of a mixed bag from what I can remember. I was catching like orf, tench, small carp. It wasn't one with the mega weights that you see now.
So how much did you have? Can you remember what you had?
It's probably £60, something like that.
Right, so you get a proper net of fish.
Yeah,
and that would have filled a keep net. That would have been.
It was mad, and like I said, I was fishing against. Even I didn't really appreciate it, but I was fishing against guys that would be like us now.
And was it a good draw? Was that a particularly good peg? It's an island peg, so I'm guessing.
I think from what I remember, the whole lake had an island in the middle of it. I mean, obviously it's match fishing, isn't it? It's all in the draw.
Yeah.
And I think being able to be on the right peg and somehow knew how to execute that peg at the time. And annoyingly, I didn't get to fish in the festival because of school, but they gave us a free holiday to go back for a week, and so I went and did that. Took the whole family back. So I think at the time I was definitely the youngest person. You get a tankard of beer for life at Whiteacres, which I've got. I think obviously I couldn't drink. I've never drunk at Whiteacres because I've only been there like pre-18. Yeah. But yeah, I think I was still the youngest person.
That.
Exactly. Yeah. Still the youngest person to win a match. So I did a bit. And then I was really sporty as a kid, so sport kind of took over, I guess. And fishing matches, I wasn't at home. We moved around a lot, so I couldn't really get into a flow with it. So fishing to me was going out on my summer holidays and having a laugh. Fishing for anything and everything. Living near the Thames, I'd fish for. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest, because my mum would just drop me off, and I still don't really know where it all came from.
I was quite similar because I had a sort of every Tuesday, my mum would take me trout fishing in the summer holidays, and every Thursday would be course fishing.
Yeah.
So I'd be practicing on the Thursday for a course fishing match, which would be at the weekend in the juniors. So similar to you. So yeah, lot more aligned like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's funny how we got all these similarities that come out, but I also find that a lot of the really good lure anglers have got that background in match fishing.
Yeah.
I think it just helps with the patience.
Yeah, and I think certainly what I've seen recent. So obviously, I started the Instagram account, and I'm sure we'll go into it, but the natural progression of life getting in the way, and then fishing coming back, and lure fishing is so convenient and amazing. But I've always been an all rounder. I've always fished for a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And I think the way that I would describe it is that lure fishing, you've got to be a visual angler. You've got to be able to look at things in 3D.
Yeah.
And I think that then helps you be a better angler and everything else. So although you've picked up the knots and the patience and all of those types of things, I think my lure fishing has made me a far better overall angler than I ever was before, necessarily.
So we've done that. So you've done your transition. You've got into your match fishing as a youngster. Sport, the usual things come along. Girls, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And now, from where you were then, how did you get to where you are now? I mean, you're now running Waterside Creative.
Watercraft Creative, yeah.
So you're doing loads of stuff with social media and that, but the transition to that didn't sort of come overnight, because I remember watching your YouTube stuff and bits and pieces. How did you get to that point? What made you get into that? Because you're more sort of London Perch finders. Obviously, you fish for perch.
Yeah.
You were living more in the sort of urban areas.
Yeah.
So how did that whole thing, describe to us how you got into the perch fishing, and then how you got into the whole starting to just filming it. I mean, filming and editing is a little bit of your background because of what you did. So you can describe a little bit about that, and then tell us how you got into the perch fishing on the canals and did that, and then what made you decide to go down the YouTube route.
Yeah, I mean, so I was very sporty when I was a kid, like I said, and it was sport and drama were my two things, and I ended up getting a place at drama school. So I went to Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama and trained to be an actor, and then ended up getting some roles down in London. So I moved to London with that as my kind of background, doing a bit of stand-up comedy, and just, to be honest, having an absolute whale of a time. It was an amazing time to be just enjoying myself and going up to Edinburgh Festival and doing stuff on the West End and just kind of generally having a good time.
Yeah.
I met my wife, Georgia, 11 or so years ago, and I think it was quite obvious then that you kind of had two options as an actor. Was either try to make it and get to my age now and decide that you're going to get a proper job, which is tough, and a lot of my mates have gone down that road and now they're having to restart their lives and figure out a career. Or use your skill set, use the acting to get a proper job in inverted commas, and see how things go moving forward and maybe come back to it one day. That was always my plan. So I ended up going into medical sales, which is the wrong type of theatre. So like I said, I've trained as an actor and ended up in theatre, but not the theatre I thought I was going to end up in. And really enjoyed it, but at the end of the day, it's work, isn't it? So you kind of grinding away. I kind of came to that juncture where I needed something to release myself a little bit in the evenings, and I lived in Brentford, right on the Grand Union Canal.
Okay.
So I thought, I'll take up lure fishing again. And you know what it's like. You buy one rod, you buy two rods, you buy three rods, and the thing grows from there. And I've always found with my angling, and I know you're exactly the same, I go down rabbit holes, and I've always been the same. So I just became totally obsessed with perch, just the whole process of lure fishing for perch. Obviously, I've fished for perch all my life, and I've lure fished for most of my late teens all the way through to now. Bass fished, perch fished, pike fished, just generally messed around. But it was probably, I don't even know when it was now. It was probably 8 years ago that I really got back into it full time. And on the basis that it was going to be easy. I'm in Brentford, the canal is just there. I'll grab one rod, one rucksack and a net and go down to the canal. Turns out that section of the Grand Union is pretty much dead. So then it became, now I've got to travel to go perch fishing, and then I started just exploring the entire system.
Yeah.
Thames, Grand Union, Lee, Kennet and Avon, the whole shebang. The Avon obviously down in near Christchurch. So it just morphed into becoming a full-time thing. Started London Perch Finder as a joke, just as a place to put photos. It was never a serious.
So this is your Insta account?
Yeah. Okay. So my Insta account is just a place to store the photos. I've always been creative, so I like writing about it. I like that I can go back through and I can read my own time.
Sort of your notes, almost like water temperature, wind direction, and all that. But yeah,
exactly that. Where I was, and I'm sure the same as you. I only have to read the first little bit, and I can almost take myself back to the moment. I can remember. That's
why I want you to sort of paint those pictures here, so that the people that are listening and watching can see that. So. You did that, and is that you obviously on that journey you discovered the sort of how successful the Ned rig could be?
Yeah, well, so the Ned rig changed everything, I guess.
What made you? What did you see somebody else fishing it? Did you just read about it? What made you start fishing the Ned rig? Because it was really, you were sort of almost not famous for it, but people really associated you with that, and one of the initial brands that decided to start bringing that out.
Yeah, so I guess what happened was I started on the normal journey, small jig heads, small shads, dibbling around on the canal, and like I said, everything in fishing for me tends to be a rabbit hole, and to be honest, at the end of that rabbit hole tends to be the biggest I can find in that fish. And I know we're all different in the way that we look at it, but for me it's always been specimen fish, and it's the same with coarse angling, all the stuff that I do. So I started off small, started to really enjoy it. Little tiny shads, really. The first rod that I really loved that I was fishing was a little tiny fine tail, 1 to 7 gram, 500 size Nasky reel. Really, really light stuff. Yeah. More fitted to trout fishing than perch fishing. And again, at that point, it was actually quite difficult to find the rods that you needed. It seems ridiculous now, but then you were
And
just
it was, I quite liked that whole light setup just because I could enjoy every single fish that I caught on it. And
absolutely.
that to me, like we've got a little pond in the woods here, but I can go out there and I can fish for them. And if I'm really using really light gear, perch, they're strong, impressive fish.
Yeah.
So even if you're getting like a, 10 to 20 centimetre perch, they're still like proper head shakes, buzzing around. So
Yeah.
it does give you, so I get that. And on the canals,
and when you,
perfect.
so I was fishing a lot around kind of Hayes and Hanwell and, Brentford and all those really urban spaces, and some of those places you don't necessarily want to be there after dark. And when you catch a specimen, when I'm talking specimen, 2-pounder from that type of place, the buzz is unbelievable. And it's kind of, that's where it started. It was small jigs and kind of trying to catch anything and everything. And, I've jumping around a bit, but I have now realised that that's the bit that people probably miss out now, because everybody comes in and they want to catch big perch. They want to fish Ned rigs, Cheb rigs, Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, all the stuff that we use to catch big perch. But they haven't gone on that initial journey of fishing a 1.5 gram jig head and a tiny little shad and feeling their way through the canal and understanding what's on the bottom. And,
all of that's been done for them and documented for them by you.
Yeah, exactly.
And others.
Exactly. But then they get frustrated. So they'll come to me and I'll get the question, how do I catch a big perch? And inevitably it's in October, end of October, November. And you're like, well, this is how you do it. But it's going to take a lot of concentration and a lot of belief to actually catch them, because you've got to learn the technique. You've got to learn your waters. You've got to figure out how to fish your rod and your reel, and then do it for long enough that you get that bite that is probably going to be a decent fish. I think what ends up happening is people just get a bit despondent on that initial phase because they've not caught all the wasps. They've not been out finding where the deep holes are. They've not done the tiny little light stuff to really get to know their waters, and they're just expecting to fish that bish bash bosh, one bite a session, Ned rig, Cheb, Texas, Carolina. For me, they're all the same. You do, yeah. It's tough. And so I guess where the Ned then came in was I started fishing small jig heads. Then it was small kind of creature baits, because obviously once you figure out there's creature baits around,
they're feeding on crawls, they're feeding on stuff like that.
Yeah, and then it started small. So my favourite at the time was the Crazy Fish Nimble, the little tiny nimbles. Really tiny ones on a small jig head. Then that nimble got slightly bigger. Then that nimble got fished on a cheb head. That cheb head got me my first really good perch, kind of 3.5 pounder out of the canal.
Nice.
And then it was like, okay, this is where I'm going with it. Harefield tackle, guys there are brilliant, and they were always a little bit more ahead of the curve than the rest of the tackle shops when it came to lure fishing stuff. They had a good wall of Z-Man, and the rest is kind of history. As soon as I started fishing, for me, as a 3D concept, it makes so much sense to have a bait in that environment that is buoyant. I love the concept that once you stop, it's still working. And there are times, again, where, say you're fishing a Carolina rig, where you want that bait to not bounce up.
Yeah.
And maybe you do also on a Carolina rig want it to come up higher. But in the instance of a Ned rig, Cheb rig, light Texas rig, I love the concept that bait is working when you've got it dead still.
Even because although it's canals, there's flow, but not necessarily flow, but just movement created by a perch swimming up to it.
Yeah.
And just that vortex in the water with that bait sitting up, it will move, and it almost looks like it's moving away from the perch. Yeah. So the perch will be like, oh, it's getting away.
Yeah. And exactly that. And so my imagination when I first started, it was the craws that first got me into it.
Yeah.
And so, you've got that classic bounce, the craw kind of, as they swim, kind of does that little bounce, and then it stops. And then it does that, which is exactly what a crayfish does when it's under pressure.
And it's being attacked, and that is defense mode.
Sticks its claws up. Obviously,
up.
Then, in my head, that was the be-all and end-all. And then you start catching them on TRDs, and you're like, it's actually just the movement. But, so that's where the Ned kind of came in. And
that's where you're talking about the Chebereshka. For people that don't understand that, most of you will, but basically the weight is separated from the hook, and it's articulated on a larger eye, which gives that degree of movement if you've threaded a floating bait onto the hook.
Exactly that. Yeah. And for me, it's that I get the same questions that, they come around over and over again, don't they? Why Cheb versus Texas, and why Texas versus Carolina? And I think the bit for me with the Cheb was it's the idea of that direct contact, especially with perch on the canals. I know that if I feel it, it's a bite. Whereas as you start moving into Texas and Carolina, your connection with the bait is slightly different. So you've got to be a lot more on it, especially with a Carolina, but you're potentially going to miss bites. So, like I said, Ched became the go-to, I guess. And then skirted jigs, kind of
for added movement.
Yeah, just became exactly. And
that's what it is, isn't it? Skirted jig is added movement.
Exactly.
It's like tentacles or legs.
Yeah, and basically. It's profile without length as well, isn't it? And that's the thing, is it's like trying to make that bite-sized chunk, filter out the small fish, look like a big enough bag of protein that any big fish in the area is going to come and have a look at it.
And I think presence in the water as well with that movement. When you look at things like the VMC moustache rig, the Mirror's Mouse, things like that for pike, it's because they've got that presence in the water and because they're pushing water
100%.
And making that movement, and it's no different. You're scaling it down for perch.
100%, exactly that. And it's like I said, it allows more stuff to move at all times. So even when it's not moving, it's still doing something, isn't it? And Mura's is a great example, with the articulation in it, and they're fantastic baits. So that's where that came, and then.
So then you've obviously you've sussed it and you're thinking, I've got my Instagram, that's becoming quite popular with the London Perch kind of thing. So you then decide that you're going to start recording it for YouTube, which in the UK is no mean feat. And I'm meaning that not from the point of view producing and recording video, but without blowing spots. Because not only are you going to blow your own spots, but I know from talking to other anglers, they'll put something up and a particular thing will be in the background. You just get hated. You just get so much grief and
100%.
Dislikes and bad negative comments on YouTube. People going, "You've blown my mark. It's my spot. Which you have to be a bit respectful for that. So you were quite clever with your camera angles right from day one. But you still told that story really well. Which is nice. So what made you decide? Right, I'm going to start videoing and filming these.
So I started getting lots of questions. You get the same questions over and over again. And because I'm dyslexic, I struggle to write out the answer over and over again. So it came from a place of just ease. I was just like, right, I'm going to answer the question, how do you fish the Ned rig? Because, that content at the time, there was a few people, Paul Parnell and the guys that had done the initial stuff, but there wasn't enough video out there of perch fishing with that style of bait. So it kind of came from there. There's also a little element of the fact that, with my background in performing, I just really enjoy the process of doing it, and I really enjoy making videos and editing videos and that side of it.
You enjoy editing videos? Did you actually say that?
Yeah, I did at the time. It's progressed.
Ben behind the camera is going to be going, what?
Yeah.
I know I'm going, what?
Yeah. Like I said, I did enjoy the process, and I've said to people before, and it's the game has changed so much in the last 5 years, and there's a few guys that I fish with, much younger lads, and really good anglers, and they've said to me, when do I start my YouTube channel? And I'm like, just if you don't want to do it, if it's not something you enjoy doing, don't do it. It's not. It's a grinding thing to do, and it's not necessarily going to pay you millions and millions of pounds to go fishing every day. And I think, for me, it was purely the fact that I enjoyed making the videos, and I've always said it. The fact that people enjoy watching them is a bonus. Genuinely. And I think so. When it came to spots, I've always had that same mindset where I'm not, from the very beginning, I knew if I'm blowing somebody's spot, I knew that there was going to be enough people watching those videos that it was going to be a big issue. So I've always tried to be as respectful as I can. There's obviously times where you blow a little bit, and I try and say in the videos as well, if you know where it is, you know where it is. But the video is hopefully secretive enough that if somebody doesn't know where it is, they can't find it. And I think there's a balance to it. And to be honest, it got to the stage where I was finding that quite frustrating. And that's why I stopped making videos for a while, obviously with COVID and not being able to get out and work and trying to create what is now starting.
So when did the channel start?
That's a very good question. I think it was probably 2016, 17, something like that.
Okay. And when did it really gain legs?
Straight away.
Right, it did. Because I was thinking maybe COVID and bits and pieces.
So it all of the momentum was pre-COVID. And it slowed down. As soon as we started doing lockdowns and it was indoor videos, to be honest, then my creative side wanted to make...
But did your views go up during COVID because people had nothing to do.
Yeah, and I was
in the views of the old videos that you've done.
Yeah. And I was looking at it the other day. I mean, those videos, the instructional stuff still just gets watched because, again, there's people are trying to find out how best to catch big perch, how to fish the Nico rig, Ned rig, all of those things. So they do keep, they keep getting watched, and it's amazing that people enjoy watching them. For me, I got to a stage where I wanted to make something a bit more creative and actually show people a little bit more. And so what I did was, I've done like 30 videos, I think, in total on the channel. And I knew that if I wanted to keep enjoying it and not just growing it for the sake of growing it, I needed to try and make videos that I enjoyed making, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that is, as we're finding out now, it's higher production values, it's camera people, or certainly mates that can record for a bit and then you can record them, and bringing more people to the table and doing videos with mates and having fun in different locations, using different methods, potentially fishing for different species, and create something a little bit more interesting for me. And whether people like that, I'm still going to do how to fish the head rig and all of those perch finder style videos. But with COVID, it just felt like a good time to take a break, focus on work. I had a little one as well, as you know, so that 2 years has been a bit nuts. And then I've now created everything, put the pieces of the puzzle in place to go full time. So I've obviously Watercraft Creative is my creative agency, so I do creative work for boat companies predominantly. But then that's given me the freedom to then film, 2 or 3 days a week.
Nice. So in that sort of YouTube period and everything else, I know that I watched some of those instructional videos. Major Craft came to you as a sponsor at that point. You said about the fine tail, etc. Where did they come in? How did that sort of gig? Because you were very well known, and I know that when you did stuff on YouTube and you said, this custom BFS setup, I know that a lot of the Major Craft dealers, Topper, whoever, they'd just sell out of it because you endorsed it basically, and people were like, well, London Perch Finder's using this rod, this reel, I've got to have it, and I need those TRDs, or I need that bait. Yeah, it worked really well from the point of view of advertising it. So did Major Craft come to you, or?
Yeah, so I can't remember how it came about. So I knew Jason Forster, kind of through Instagram at the time, and Jason was with them, and I think he introduced me to Mike, and I obviously knew Andy. And so as the videos came out, there was quite a lot of momentum behind it, as you said, and it just made sense to have some sort of relationship with the guys at Major Craft. To be completely honest, it's more of just a collaboration rather than a lucrative sponsorship. And I think that's the other thing that people potentially behind the scenes think, that these there's these big shiny paychecks in the background. For me, it was just about having a direct line to a brand that I love. So that when, for example, with the BFS Custom, when we came to make that rod, I had some input into that process. And for me at the time, that was amazing. And I love the rods. I think they're awesome. And exactly what we needed at that period of time. And the growth in bringing all of those rods over from the Benkeys right the way through to the MSX Limited, and the fine tails, which I think are amazing rods as well. It made sense. And so that kind of more relaxed approach with them started quite quickly. I used to fish a speed style, and again, they went nuts. And I think it's also showing that you can use that kit and those techniques to fish for everything. I had 111 centimetre pike out of the river.
There's some monster chub as well.
Yeah, and exactly.
I remember there's a very iconic picture of you, like the really nice moody background, and you got really cool bright colours on with that chub, and it's just like, you can feel how cold it is in the photo. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Cheers.
I think you got a nice little woolly hat on, and I remember that.
And that's exactly. And you realise that you can catch those fish on the same rod as you're fishing for perch and have a great time. And I think it captured people's imaginations. I think the BFS stuff, it's come at the right time as well, because we're so in the UK, we're so into our fishing in all other aspects, and I think certainly. There was a phase of lure anglers that had gone to the JDM stuff, and then we had the growth of lure angling, which all kind of coincided when I started. So the wider market didn't know about Older Barons, and didn't know about the Abu BF8s, and didn't know about the Major Craft rods and the Megabass rods, and Topperman and Lure Division obviously were there, but that growth has happened over the last maybe 6 or 7 years, and it's amazing to see. And I think that captured people's imaginations as well.
And I think perch are just such a. I think it was Isaac Walton said that they were the biggest of all fish.
Yeah.
But there was a guy before yourself who was putting stuff. James Forrester.
Yeah.
Was it round Oxford
Yeah,
way?
yeah.
And that really sort of blew up. Just people seeing people catching those perch, and that light bulb go, and everybody just wants to catch them because they look so impressive.
Yeah, I mean they are the biggest of all fish, and they're amazing. I think, you know, everybody says it, but you see your first 2-pounder, you think it's the biggest fish you've ever seen. 3-pounder, the biggest fish you've ever seen. 4, 5. It's like every time you see that next step up, you're like, this fish can't get any more impressive. They are truly wonderful.
And strong.
Oh, just the best. Well, I had one on the canal yesterday, my first perch session of this river season, and it's funny, isn't it? Like, now everybody's into it. I get so many comments like, when are you going perch fishing again? When are you going? Like, it's going to come. Don't worry. We're going to get to the best bit. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So like I said, just started now, and I had, you know, a classic 2, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was such a buzz. You know, summer perch, super strong in the canal, landed it, and to be honest, it might as well have been a 415. You know, I'm just so excited by seeing an epic fish in any one environment. And that's the other thing. I think you've got to split where you're going to catch your perch, what your expectations are, and allow yourself to be excited by whatever the biggest possible fish is in the place that you're fishing. Because obviously, you know, the likes of the things you're catching over in Holland, you ain't going to catch them over here. No. So, you know, when you're fishing the canal, my number is probably 2. If I'm fishing some of the rivers, that number probably goes up to 3.5.
But using the right gear, you can still enjoy that fish if it's a pound.
100%.
You can still enjoy if it's 6 ounces.
Yeah.
And that's where that BFS thing comes in, I think.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Really.
Yeah.
So, out of all of those perch you've caught, obviously, you know, which is the most memorable for us? Tell us a really cool story about going down there and getting a perch and something that really went wrong, or just a really cool situation catching a fish. Doesn't have to be the biggest fish. Give us a story.
Yeah, so
then.
To be honest, like, there's so many cool sessions, and that's the thing that I love about lure fishing. And I've said it over and I just implore anybody, that most people watching this will have gone, but if you haven't, get a rod and go and enjoy it, because you'll have these moments on the bank where you're just stood there in like awe of the ridiculousness of the situation you find yourself in. And I've had a few. Like I said, the 111 centimetre pike from the river spawned out 22 and a bit pound, but biggest pike I've ever seen on the bank. And that was, again, a 0.7 to 7 gram rod, a 2-hour session. You drop in on somewhere with pretty low expectations and end up catching the fish of your life, certainly, you know, the fish of my life, in terms of pike. And I had a session on the perch where I took a friend of my wife's husband perch fishing, and he'd bought himself a BFS rod over time and watched a few videos and said, okay, well, come with me, we'll go fishing. And to be honest, I think I've kind of ruined it for him instantaneously after this session. So we went down to the river. There's this lovely section, nice big slack. It was probably February type time, I reckon. And we started kind of casting into the slack, you know, classic, the river's going around the corner, so you just over the top of the crease, dropping it down, feeling it onto the bottom. Relatively technical in the sense that you're fishing as light as you can to keep it there through the flow and just kind of wiggling it into the slack. And there was a pod of fish on the edge of this slack, and annoyingly, my wife's husband just watched me empty this swim, and I just couldn't get him to catch. I was like, cast there, let it onto the bottom, just nothing. And then every single time I'd cast over the top, I'd have another fish. So we were there an hour. I had 11 perch from like upper 2s all the way up to 4 pound 4, which was my PB at the time.
Right.
And I'd never had a 4 at that stage. And I had, you know, something ridiculous. I think it was 6 over 310, something like that. And then this 4 pound 4. And I was just in total like dreamland. It was the most amazing experience. And it was one of those ones where, again, going back to what I said earlier on, I'd done so many hours up to that point of right tiny little weights all the way up to, you know, big, massive skirted jigs on, you know, like Legend Tournament bass, you know, 14 gram skirted jigs. And I was probably fishing 5 grams skirted Ned in relatively strong flow, but it had to be in that, you know, dustbin lid. You know what it's like?
Yeah.
And it had to be, they're so funny, aren't they? And it sometimes feels like if it's not on the right angle and it's not on the right dustbin lid, it's got to enter at the right place and leave at the right place. It's got to be
natural.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was just one of those ones. Every single time I got it on that spot, fish. You'd net one, take a photo, put it back. cast the same spot, net one take. It was just biblical. Best hours perch fishing I've ever had. And I've had some awesome sessions since, and had guys wandering down behind me on the canal. And to be honest, I am a bit secretive when it comes to, if I see somebody and I've got a fish, I might try and get it gone, because there's not that many spots in the UK where you catch.
No, I've heard this before. I heard from Dan Sales. He said, I went up there and he's fishing and this, that, the other. And I think he'd gone with Jason Vorster incidentally, and they'd gone somewhere obscure. And they'd gone up there and they'd catch him, blah, blah, they're fishing. And then they'd caught like 3 or 4 good fish, put the fish back, and then they're doing something. And literally this guy just pushed out the bushes and went, I've just watched you catch all those fish and blah, blah, blah. And they just knew he was going to go straight up tackle shot, and it was just going to be blown. I think Dan was absolutely gutted because he tried to be as secretive as he could about these places so that they didn't get blown, didn't get the pressure.
Yeah, and it's like
it is a problem.
It is, and part of you thinks. So I had a session on the river where I had one, and there was this group of lads that were coming up, and I had it in the net. They'd seen me catch it, so obviously I stopped and I wanted a photo with it. It was a nice 3, I think, 3-4, 3-5 type fish. So I was like, I'm going to take a photo. And I wanted to weigh it, just one of those ones you sometimes like to get a benchmark for an area. So I weighed this fish. By the time the guys had come up and they're looking at it, oh my god, it's the biggest perch! Yeah, and it was really nice. Put it back in the water, and then I'm stood there and I'm talking to them. And as I'm talking to them, I just like when you're in just blackout mode, I just threw the bait straight back into the slack
where you'd
instantly. Same one again. So now they're stood there watching me catch another one. And then I just thought, oh, sod it, I'll just keep going. So I had 6 fish, in a row, bang, 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 all over 3. I think I had 2 315s in that one. And again, it's never been the same since. And it's so sad because you want to just be like, I want everybody to see it. It's really cool. And there's another side of you that thinks, well, they're not going to necessarily fish the right methods. But unfortunately, like one of my favourite species is grayling. I love grayling.
I've seen you catch some epic grayling.
Yeah, and they are just majestic creatures, but they are awful when it comes to pressure. They just move off, and you won't see them again. You can't even
keep them out of the water for that long. They just turn.
Well, exactly. They really are just really delicate. But also, I think if they've been caught a couple of times, and you might see them out twice, and then you won't see them. They'll either next time they'll come out, they'll be miles away. And it's the same with perch. They're just not very good under pressure because they, especially that time of year where we're really targeting them. They're in a dustbin lid. If you know where that dustbin lid is, you'll catch them all season in the same dustbin lid. They might move to another dustbin lid, but they're going to be all together. And they'll move together, and that's it. You won't see them.
Well, we get a lot of criticism on social media when we're fishing for the big perch in March, when they're spawning in Holland. Yeah. Yes, you do get a lot of criticism, etc. The difference is they commercially net those waters.
Yeah.
So I think that the angling pressure and what the angling brings to the local community in terms of revenue, guiding, accommodation, fuel, tackle, licenses sold, I think is the least of the problems of those big perch that are out in Holland.
Exactly, and they're short-lived, and I think that...
Well, those fish, the fish that are out in Holland, when I'm talking to Jan out there, I'm saying, how old do you think he's out? Like that, 53... He's like, I said to him, how old do you reckon that was? He's like 25 years.
Yeah, see, I've heard differing reports that, the big ones might last 10. And so the other thing is, whether it's 10 or whether it's 25, they come through in a group of a size
age
bracket,
class, and
they will just drop off the edge of a cliff. And it's just the natural course of things. I've had areas of some of my favourite rivers where I think, oh, this is it. I've found utopia. I'm going to be in perch for days.
Yeah.
You have an amazing season, slightly less amazing season, slightly less amazing season, and then you're waiting for the next age bracket. Yeah. And that's not an angling thing. That's just the way it is. And I think in Holland, what you've got is obviously a higher density of fish in a massive water like
Where's
that.
7 rivers feeding into one area by the sea.
Yeah.
So everything,
Exactly. It's crazy in comparison, isn't it? And I think that's why we do have to be a bit more protective over here, because these systems are, for starters, they're smaller.
Yeah.
They're often private. And one of the things for me that, I don't want to be the person that's responsible for people poaching the places that I have tickets, because then it looks me that looks bad.
I know that you said at one point, I remember having a chat with you, and you said, because my profile's been raised and I've got this sort of social media profile, I've got to be super careful that I'm not doing anything wrong. So you literally bought tickets to every single club on all of the waterways that you're fishing, so that if you did accidentally move into another area just because you're nomadic, you're walking, you're casting, you're not necessarily thinking, and you cross a boundary, you could be like, yeah, I've got that ticket, yeah, I've got that.
Yeah, and you have to. I'd certainly, and obviously, even if I didn't have these things, I would always try and do that anyway. But it has got to a stage where, it's crazy to be honest. I became a ticket collector for a long time, and I've probably, backed off a bit because now I've explored all of the areas.
Yeah.
I know
you don't want to be accused of guesting.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is now, that's what I see, is that I see people come to where I fish, and I know they don't have a ticket, and unfortunately, that's on me for showing them where those things are. And that's why this perpetual cycle of being slightly secretive comes from, because it's just a shame that that's the way it works. Yeah. But it's it is what it is there. And I get why it happens, because a big perch is a special thing. If you know when one is, it's very difficult not to go and chase it.
So this is all of this big perch hunting has obviously ultimately come into you transitioning into the whole boat thing, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's where you're at now. Another rabbit hole, but a much more expensive rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's
so how did that start? What made you think? For me, I did the bank fishing, then I sort of like the kite. I'm just a bit of a gadgety guy. I just want all the toys, and I just love all of that stuff. So it naturally progressed from like doing the street fishing to the kayak and tricking the kayak out, wrapping the kayak and having a couple of screens on the kayak and all of the toys and all the storage and a rod locker and all of those cool things, to naturally progress into that bass boat.
Yeah.
So what made you think? Was it you wanted to explore more waters, or did you just have a love for the boats? What was it?
Yeah, so I think probably exploring and being quite gadgety as well. I think probably where it came from is you start looking at the bass guys in America, and you start transitioning their methods here. So the Ned rig, a great example. And then inevitably you're watching them on a boat with a live scope or with a side scan unit of any particular company, and with their power poles and their talons, and you suddenly start it just becomes a thing, doesn't it? So
you replicate that.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because you think, right, I'll get a boat that's going to open up loads of fishing, and I'm going to catch loads of fish in these places that I can't currently get to, and it's just not how it works. It takes a lot of time to just get used to maneuvering the thing, get used to the technology, whatever. And you catch fish without doubt, but it's a whole other technique to learn. And I think for
boat control is
huge.
Is massive.
It is huge, and I think now I'm working in boats as well, so I'm doing a lot of stuff, as you know, on much bigger stuff on the sea, and just really getting into being techie about boats has been fun. And I think with fishing, for me, the most interesting thing is the puzzle. So be that if I'm chub fishing, coarse chub fishing with a bit of bread and link ledger, all the way through to perch fishing, and then with boats. And I need to keep putting puzzles in front of myself, and what more complicated puzzle than fishing off a boat? And so that's where it's come from, is this want to really dive into the technical nature of being on a boat.
Yeah.
And also being with your mates.
Yeah.
Getting on the boat, all of you on the boat, you're all together. It's a different day to, trotting down the bank.
Yeah, it's a nice social aspect, isn't it? And I suppose as we're getting older, it's more comfortable, isn't it? You've got your flask there.
Yeah.
You can take as many sandwiches as you want. I now take the barbecue with me.
Yeah.
It's and I can, because the boat's big enough.
Yeah,
and
exactly that.
If the boat's not big enough, guess what? I'm going to buy a bigger one.
Yeah.
Which I'm literally about to do.
I know, and that's exactly what's happened to me. So I started off with a Linda 445, 4 meters 45, lovely boat, super tricked out. Worked with the guys at Marine Power who were selling them, and kind of, it's been really fun developing that, and that lasted 18 months, and now I've got a 545. It's you just want to get bigger and bigger. And for me, what it's done is it opened up. Actually, what I've enjoyed more is the bass fishing.
How did that sort of transition come about? What made you go for the salt side of things?
So, and it's the same. I think these two things, specialist angling and the salt stuff, is something I've always done, but just not talked about. Yeah. And so it just became more natural to talk about it as time went on, because I didn't want to just become this perch person, because that's not my angling. It's not all about that. And actually, the reason that I love perch so much is because I don't spend the whole year faffing around on them. I give them their time in the summer, and I coming back slowly now, a few canal sessions, and then coming into October, November, December, that's when I'm really starting to get on it, and obviously then into the key time.
Yeah.
So bass fits really nicely in that interim period, especially from now till the end of October. They are just awesome. And shallow water bass fishing on a boat, on a bass boat, like an American bass styly boat with a casting deck, all of the tech on there. Last year we were ghosting into bladderwrack beds and using the talons like you see the guys fishing, brush piles and stuff in America.
Yeah.
And we're doing that for bass over here, and that's where it became addictive. And you're catching 55, 60 centimetre bass off the top, or, using like weightless kind of basically Senkos through the bladderwrack. And what better thing to do this time of year? You could be piddling around on the canal.
They do fight so hard as well, bass.
The hit is amazing. Even, catching waspy sized bass.
Yeah.
And the hit.
Schoolies.
Yeah, the hit is just incredible. So I think, for me, it's just having something to keep me busy before coming back to the other thing. And then the boat stuff has just opened it up. So I've always fished them off the bank, and I love it. Getting there at dawn, putting the waders on, having your coffee in the car on the way down, grabbing a cheeky double sausage and egg McMuffin, and it becomes
with no egg.
With no egg, same as you. The only other person I've found that doesn't like eggs.
Or fish.
Yeah, this is scary.
Yeah.
We're the same person. But going down, sun rising, mist on the water, chest high in the sea, nobody around. Working a top water and that big bass hit. It is for me, it's like a goosebumps thing. And my parents live in Pembrokeshire now, and it's like, for the last 10 years, I've spent a lot of time fishing for them. But what the boat does is it means that you're not beholden to that time of the morning.
Yeah.
Because you just then follow the bass to the next bit where they feed, and the next bit where they feed, and the next bit, and the tide rises on another bladderwrack bed or whatever. It opens up a whole style of fishing. So where I'd go down and expect to catch maybe on a good day like 6 nice bass off the shore. Me and Rory, the guy that I go fishing with a lot from Anglers Only, we had a session in Pembrokeshire beginning of this season. We had 250 bass in a day.
That's insane.
It's mental. And you're sat on the boat, and I've never seen it like this before, but we're sat on this boat, we're down in Pems, and there's loads of birds diving, so obviously we naturally just progress to the birds. And we're just kind of idling next to these birds. You're like, there's a lot of bass here. Just kind of idling a little bit more, and the birds lifted off, and then suddenly you're just seeing bass popping off everywhere. So you catch one. I've never had this. It was biblical. So you catch like a 55 to 60 centimetre bass, good fish, and you're bringing it up. And as it would come up, there would be like 10 of exactly the same size or bigger with it. But it was like it came through a carpet of bass. So like the 10 would rise up with it, but underneath was just this like all swimming against the tide. Just thousands and thousands and thousands of bass. It was unbelievable. So we had them up to 70 plus centimetres, probably had. Yeah.
Was this the day that you just got so preoccupied with it you didn't really film?
Couldn't, and it was just literally it was one of those moments where you just have to live in it and enjoy the nature and the moment of it. And I think that's the other thing with boats, is that you see stuff that you just wouldn't see, seeing dolphins and sharks and all sorts of things that you're just like, I wouldn't see this if I was still on the bank. So so that's where the bass fishing came from. And I think I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting the boat to really open up this whole other avenue. And I think more and more people are now realising that bass fishing is just a phenomenal thing to do in the summer.
It's a huge market for bass.
The massive
bass anglers that are super keen, they seem to have like unlimited budgets.
Well, they're more JDM than we're JDM. Do you know, everything is. I think the new
the lures,
the new fish topwater, I think is like 30 quid. Do you know, it's like the pachinkos, they're like 25. I went to a bass show from the Bass Chasers guy down on the south coast. They did one at the beginning of the year, and you just waltz in, pick up like a bag that big, and it's like £350 worth of lures. It's mind-boggling, but it doesn't have to be complicated bass fishing as well. One topwater, £16 fluoro, £20
I know.
braid.
I always try and take my daughter bass fishing every year.
Yeah.
Whether it's just hiring a boat and we just go out on a not charter, but just the two of us, and just pay the extra bit of money and get out there, because the hits and just to see the look on her face, just like literally just dropping down to the bottom.
Yeah.
You're going across a bar or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, just wind up, right? Just feel the bottom. feel the bottom, whoop,
Yeah.
and it's like, that whole, she's so, and just to watch that and feel that adrenaline, and mate,
it's special. It really is.
But we're so lucky in the UK, that we've got that. Great perch fishing, great bass fishing.
And I think everybody needs to realise it as well. Because, I mean, for example, I put up a couple of videos recently, which I'm building a few before we start talking about it, really. But one of them was, what did we do? We did a perch fishing we did a bass fishing film, and then mayfly trout fishing.
Yeah, so was the bass fishing one the one that you were shooting in the harbour where you were working the top water?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I saw that.
It's cool. Well, so we're going tomorrow, actually, so but we'll get out on the boat as soon as it's sorted. But people, a couple of people, but why not just perch fishing? And you're like, just open your eyes to it. There's so much stuff that you can transition your 7 to 21 gram mid-range lure rod in the summer, where you could be potching around on the river, in the weed, trying to find, pike that are knackered in the heat and all that type of stuff. Or you could be out catching amazing sea bass, getting a proper pull on the string. It's a nice transition to be doing at this time of year.
The only thing that I hate about the salt, ironically, is the salt.
Yeah.
It ruins...
Eats everything.
I took the jumbo out. I did that thing in Suffolk that we put up on YouTube, and bits and pieces. It's just you don't pay enough attention. Yeah. And I had an Anderson plug, and it was sat in that much water, and it just ate everything.
Yeah.
The salt water just really. So with your gear, obviously wash everything down, guys. Really be diligent with it.
Yeah.
Talk us through when you've come off the salt. What do you do to make sure your reels don't get absolutely ruined?
So I've done the buy cheap, use it for a season, expect it to be broken option. Okay. Buy another one. There's 65, 70 pound reels that I've tried to do bass seasons with, and inevitably it finishes the same way every single time. They just die. It doesn't matter whether you wash them, they just will die. So I've always gone a little bit more premium on the reels that I'm using. Tends to be obviously Shimano's. Tend to try and find the ones that have got the mag seal that are gonna last a little bit better, and they do. You don't have to wash them every single time. Better if you do, but you'll get away with it if you go on a session. You're staying somewhere.
And so what you do is screw your drag down really tight and then wash them off.
Yeah, wash the whole thing. Just give it a blast. And I've always, touch wood to this point, with a decent reel that's designed to take it, that's been fine. With the boat, make sure your anodes are perfect. Make sure that your wiring on the boat is good.
Marine grade.
Yeah, and if I've made the mistake with a talon that was not quite fitted properly, and, you'll get corrosion on, the bracket that you think is impossible to corrode. And I've had, that flaking off in the salt because it's just not wired properly. So those things, but you'll find out about them really quickly, as you found out with yours. It's like you suddenly go, oh, crap, I can't put that there. And so washing the boat down, obviously I'll fill it up and let the bung out. So all the salt water's gone. Then I'll put a flush through of fresh water through the boat. Make sure you wash your engine out. I mean, the new engines, they are better. And I'll often do a session in one place, trailer the boat to another place. I'm not going to wash it on that day that I trailer it to another place. I might do another session, then drive all the way home. I might forget when I get back, wash it on the third day. You're probably going to be okay, but just make sure you're washing the outboard. You can obviously, all of them come with the hose pipe connection, but if you get the ones that go underneath the water intake manifolds, then just pop those around there, give it a good blast, spray it down, try and keep it clean. Because it's it dries on top of it as well and creates almost like a sandpaper effect that you'll start just getting little tiny scratches on the boat if you don't get it off.
Yeah.
But that being said, it's not actually that difficult, and
no, you just got to be diligent.
You've just got to do it.
You've got to have enough hours in the day.
Yeah, you got. And just I think with the reels, splash them clean. Buy something that can deal with the salt and splash them clean every time you use them, and you should be fine. And with a lot of those reels, if you're buying up that sort of mid to upper level, if a bearing goes, you just buy it. There's another one. You send them back, get them serviced. That's great. You can do it with the cheaper reels, but they just break every single time.
Yeah.
And you'll do 5 years, you'll spend the same as you would have spent on the really nice one.
So are you doing anything else out in the salt? You getting in the mullet and bits and pieces, or just really the bass because they're just so...
Yeah, the bass and wrasse.
Yeah, wrasse.
Yeah, they are just epic. And off the shore, fishing kind of stepped up perch styly. They are unbelievable. And if you haven't fished for them, you've got to go out. I mean, the first hit and the first run is biblical. It's like nothing. There is nothing that does that.
On light gear, it doesn't matter if I think we were filming for Shimano years back, and I went down with Andy at Weymouth, and we had like a little, solid tip rod that you'd be dibbling on the canal.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I'll just go down here for some wrasse." Hit this thing, and it was like hooped over, going. I was like, "Mate, it's massive." Get it out. It's like a wrasse about this big.
Yeah.
It's like, I
know they're amazing. They are amazing, and as they get. So I had one the other week that was like 5.5 pounds, and the first hit is like, it's just mad, totally mad. It's like perch on steroids in the sea.
Well, I think that's the key thing in the sea.
Yeah.
The bass and wrasse, they're living in a washing machine basically.
Yeah, exactly that.
And that is going to build muscle and everything else. They're in an environment where it's really brutal, so they are muscular, strong fish.
Yeah.
It's no different. You take a carp out of a river and put it in a still water. What happens? It gets big and fat.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not fighting the current, but it's still eating the same amount of food. But those fish, like the bass and the wrasse, that's why they're... And then you get tropical fish. Once you've come away from fresh water, you go into salt. The fish fight harder. Then you get salt in warm water.
Yeah.
They fight even harder.
Yeah.
So,
it's another rabbit hole, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's another place to get slightly obsessed with. And I think... Yeah, if anybody hasn't done it, it's a perfect thing to do this time of year. So inevitably that comes with a bit of pollock fishing for me, because you're in and around the same places, especially in Pems, on the boat, in Pems, off the rocks. You're going to catch bass, pollock, wrasse, some coalfish.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of bait fishing on the sea, but it's not as much my thing.
No, I don't like it. It's messy. It's smelly.
Yeah, and it's a bit. They're very powerful. Don't get me wrong. And the big congers and the big rays and the tope that I fish for, it's really good fun.
Yeah.
But to be honest, at that point, I'd rather be barbel fishing. So it's like, if I'm gonna bait fish, I'd rather go and catch a barbel.
Yeah.
So, I just love fishing, mate. I could do it all day long, every single day, every species, on the boat, off the boat, in the sea, in the fresh.
So what's the future hold for you now? So where are you going with your new company and bits and pieces? What are you sort of thinking about doing? What can we look forward to in the future?
So lots more videos. We're back filming. I'm going to try and get it to fingers crossed, a video a week, but a couple a month, definitely. And the videos that are up there, which you're more than welcome to go have a look at. Like I said, we've not really been shouting about them too much, but the production level is a bit higher. Drone stuff, second camera, that type of thing.
And all of this is going out on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, so
which is
Perch Finder TV, which is obviously on YouTube. Probably going to transition to Watercraft TV at some point. The thing for me is trying to get the perch. There's going to be as much, if not more, perch fishing content than there ever was before. But I want to make sure that I'm doing a bit of everything, because that is what I do. And like I said at the very beginning, for me, it's about I need to enjoy doing what I'm doing. And if I feel like I'm getting ploddy with it, then it'll just look ploddy on camera. So the plan is a lot more videos, and just get out on the bank and have some fun. There's loads of other stuff in the pipeline. There's some TV bits. And
what shows you doing this year? You're going to be people go able to catch up with you at some shows?
Yeah, so I'm going to be at Southampton Boat Show, which is coming up in September. My boat's going to be on the Suzuki stand for the whole show. So if you want to come and see my new UMS, which is going to be there, all Garmined up, and the new kind of Kraken trolling motor, I'm hoping is going to be on there, which is quite cool, with the power poles on the back. It's going to be nice to have a freshwater lure boat at Southampton Boat Show on a big stand, which is quite cool.
That's cool.
Nice change for the UK, I guess. Boat Life, which is coming up in February, so I'm doing quite a lot.
Talk to us a bit about Boat Life. How did that come about, and what's the concept that they're trying to do there? So,
Boat Life's started by a guy called Richard Dove. I met Richard October last year. It's essentially just a show for the boating community in the UK. It's a winter show, so obviously Southampton being the main summer show. What Rich wanted to create is a show for inland boating, canal boats, big boats, like the Fairlines and all of the others, Ribs and all sorts. Wake, surf, stand-up paddleboard, but also he's got a big fishing area now at the show. So we did the fishing
They had
area.
a simulator there last year. You had loads of families.
Yeah.
From what I saw on social media, it was almost like the fishing area of the show was more popular than.
Oh yeah, it was brilliant, and I think it just shows that there's a real appetite for boats and fishing in the UK at the moment. And I think fishing, there's a huge momentum behind it. I've said it for ages, and it's so good that people are waking up to fishing in general, because all of the benefits that we know, and I'm really passionate about that stuff, and trying to get people into it. And then I think more and more people are realising that boating is just a really nice way to be on the water.
Boating can involve everybody. So you can have a boat and you can go out and you can fish on it with Rory or with Sam or whoever.
Yeah.
But also you can take your wife out, you can take your kids out, and you can go and have a nice day.
Yeah.
But you can incorporate fishing into that.
Yeah.
So if you've got a family of 4, so you've got the mum and the dad, and then you've got a daughter and a son.
Yeah.
The dad and the son can be fishing, and the mum and the daughter can be reading a book or getting a bit of a tan or throwing a ball for the dog over the side of that. But everybody can go out, and that one family resource of the boat can be used by everybody. I think it's a nice concept.
It is
it's
a nice
healthy.
concept. It really is. So there's a family called the McKells. They've got a boat called Squidward down in on the south coast, and they're a great example of it. Firstly, they're lovely. And just so much fun.
Luke, Caroline and Darren.
Exactly. And so they go out on the boat together pretty much every weekend. And so they've got a couple of other kids as well that go out with them, but Luke, Caroline and Darren's gone from my head. They're out all the time, and they fish together, they stay on the boat in the marina, they barbecue off the boat. What better way to spend time together? And they just wouldn't do it. They've said it. That just brings them together as a unit, and it's wonderful to see, and something that definitely for me and Georgia and Rowena, that's why I'm really excited about the slightly bigger boat, because inevitably it becomes, like you said, more than just a fishing platform. So it's cool. So that's what Boat Life is. It's showing off boating. It's bringing all of the different communities together, and I'm trying to utilise it to get to know a few more canal boaters, so they don't shout at me as much while I'm on the canal, and just get everybody to realise that we all love.
And when's that?
So that is February, middle of February next year.
Right.
So really excited about that. And then obviously the big one. There's lots of stuff coming with that, and a few more exciting announcements on the horizon. But like I said, once I've got the boat, you'll get bored of seeing me on the boat. I think it's going to be...
No, I won't. I'm coming, and Ben is coming.
Good.
You are coming, my friend. We're going to go bass fishing and get some cool content for the YouTube channel.
Sold. We need to do that in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll get on that. Well, we've got a hectic one now. We're currently, this afternoon, we're going to be out to Holland.
Cool.
From Holland, we're going through Germany, over into Sweden, doing a bit in Sweden, back down, rig a new boat in Holland, bring that back. Then I think we're back for 4 or 5 days, and then we fly to Norway.
Amazing.
So we're going to be up against it, but we're going to be doing loads of pods along the way, so get loads of podcasts churned out so that you got more content to listen to and watch, which will be cool. But right, what one thing could you not be without when you're fishing?
Wow.
What is your one thing that you have to have with you?
It's a difficult one. Very, very difficult one. So, I'd say a hat, because my hairline is getting worse and worse by the day. That is probably pretty essential. But I would. So if I'm perch fishing, I've got to have some floaty, stretchy, salt based baits. And usually in a June buggy type colour, because it's a go-to. Bass fishing, it's got to be a Pachinko 100, best lure in bass fishing. I think probably that we've spoken about this a lot. The underrated thing is a pair of proper fishing sunglasses.
That came up before. Somebody said that is one of the things that they had to have, and I think for eye protection as well.
Yeah,
I've spoken to people, older anglers, and have said that they've been told how much their eyes have degraded just through the sun. Yeah. So I think it's important. I wear sunglasses when I'm on the dog walk even.
I mean, it's peeing down rain outside. I've still got mine on the top of my hat when I came in. So I think that
they are important.
They are.
Yeah, to protect the eyes, not only from Chebureshka weights flying back at you out of snags and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also just generally protect your eyes against UV,
Yeah.
and especially on the water where you've got that reflective, give you a headache, bad headache.
Yeah,
So yeah,
especially on the
I'd
boat.
say that's a good shout.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
Cool. Right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up, buddy.
Cool. Thanks so much
for coming on, mate. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been
Top
awesome.
man.
Cheers, dude.
Take it easy.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon.